Imagine being abandoned in a third-rate nursing home by your only son, the one you raised alone with unimaginable sacrifice. Patricia, at 67, watched Kevin sign the papers without even being able to look her in the eyes and say, "It's better this way, Mom." But what was better was only for him. But Patricia made a choice that defied all human logic. She chose to forgive. Patricia looked at the form on the scratched wooden table. Her hands trembled as she held the blue pen Kevin had just handed her. The nursing home office smelled of disinfectant, mixed with something she couldn't identify. Maybe abandonment, maybe fear. Kevin stood beside her, but seemed miles away. His eyes avoided hers as if he were running from something bigger than that small, claustrophobic room. Patricia felt her heart tighten when she realized her only son couldn't even look at her. It was as if she were already invisible, just another number in that cold place. Kevin adjusted his expensive Italian tie, a nervous gesture he always made when he felt uncomfortable. "It's better this way, Mom," he said with a tense, mechanical voice, as if he had rehearsed those words on the way. Patricia felt each syllable like a blade piercing her chest. Better for whom? She wanted to scream, but the words got stuck in her throat. She looked around, peeling walls, cracked plastic chairs, a crooked crucifix hanging behind the receptionist who chewed gum with indifference. This wasn't the place she had imagined spending her last years. This wasn't the ending she dreamed of after so much sacrifice, so much giving, so much love poured out. The pen slid across the paper as Patricia signed her own fate. Each letter of her name seemed to weigh a ton. Kevin sighed with relief when she finished, as if he had just gotten rid of an enormous weight, and he had. He quickly grabbed the papers, without ceremony, without a hug, without that look that children give their mothers in difficult moments. "I'll call soon," he mumbled, but even Patricia knew it was a lie. She knew that tone. It was the same one he used as a child to promise he would clean his room and never did. But now the consequences were infinitely more painful. Now it wasn't just a messy room, it was a life being left behind. Patricia watched Kevin walk toward the frosted glass door. His leather shoes made a hollow sound against the worn linoleum floor. She wanted to scream, wanted to run after him, wanted to hold his face and ask where was the boy she rocked during fever nights. But Patricia just stood there, paralyzed, watching her son disappear down the hallway without looking back even once. The receptionist handed her a plastic badge with her name misspelled and the room number. "Welcome to Sunset Gardens," she said without emotion, returning to look at her phone. There were no gardens there. There was no sunset. There was only loneliness wrapped in empty promises. That night, lying in a narrow bed that creaked with every movement, Patricia looked at the stained ceiling and prayed. "Lord, what did I do wrong?" Tears rolled down her wrinkled face, wetting the thin pillow that smelled of mothballs. She thought about all the faith stories she had heard at church, about how God never abandons his children. But in that moment, surrounded by darkness and silence broken only by distant moans of other forgotten ones, Patricia felt completely alone. Had even God forgotten about her? Was this the reward for a lifetime of dedication and unconditional love? She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Only the question that echoed without answer. How did we get here? Patricia's hands had always been her trademark. Thin and agile fingers that danced over delicate fabrics, as if orchestrating a silent symphony. For 40 years, she transformed dreams into reality through thread, needle, and patience that seemed infinite. Her small home studio had seen hundreds of brides pass through the door with eyes shining with hope. Patricia didn't just sew dresses, she embroidered love stories in each stitch, in each meticulous detail that only she knew how to make. Roses and pearl, French lace sleeves, trains that looked like clouds. Each piece carried a piece of her soul and all her extraordinary talent. Kevin was only 3 when Patricia's marriage collapsed. The divorce was like a tornado that ripped everything up by the roots. The house, security, hope. Her ex-husband left leaving only debts and broken promises scattered on the floor. Patricia found herself alone with a small boy. No pension, no help, no safety net. It was her sewing machine, that old singer inherited from her grandmother, that saved them both. She sewed during the night while Kevin slept, her eyes burning with fatigue, her fingers sometimes bleeding from so much work. But she never complained. She never allowed Kevin to feel the weight of the daily struggle she waged to put food on the table. The years passed in a routine of silent sacrifices. While other mothers went to parties or out with friends, Patricia stayed hunched over fabrics until dawn. Kevin wanted brand-name sneakers. She made 2 extra dresses. Kevin needed a new school uniform. There she was, sewing until her fingers hurt. When he wanted to take tennis lessons at the club, Patricia agreed to make debutante dresses for free just to get the scholarship her son so desired. She ate less so he could eat more. She wore old clothes so he could have new ones. Her love was practical, made of concrete actions more than pretty words. And Kevin grew up never lacking anything except understanding of how much it all cost. Patricia remembered each sacrifice as if they were invisible scars marked on her heart. The time she refused urgent dental treatment to pay for Kevin's school trip. The Easter when she ate only bread so he could have the chocolate he wanted so much. The winters when she shivered with cold because she had sold the heater to buy his college books. Kevin graduated in administration with honors, applauded by everyone, while Patricia watched from the last row with a patched coat and a proud smile on her face. He never asked how much that diploma hanging on the wall cost. He never questioned why his mother had such deep wrinkles at 50. He just accepted everything as if it were his right, as if miracles happened without price. Now, at 67, lying in that cheap nursing home bed, Patricia realized a bitter truth. She had given Kevin all the tools to fly, but forgot to teach that roots also matter. He learned to climb in life, but didn't learn to look down and thank who supported him while he climbed. Patricia closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, not of revolt, but of surrender. Lord, I did what I could with the love I had. Now he is in your hands. And in that silent surrender, even amid the pain that tore her chest, there was a strange peace, as if God were reminding her that true love is never wasted, even when it seems unreturned. Kevin never planned to forget his mother, not consciously at least. It all started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like poison being poured drop by drop into a glass of crystal clear water. It was at an elegant corporate event, one of those with low lights and expensive champagne circulating on silver trays. Kevin was finally getting where he always wanted, the world of the successful, those who wear Swiss watches and talk about offshore investments. It was there he met Clarissa, a woman who seemed born for that environment. She wore a tight black dress, shoes that cost more than many people's rent, and had that smile that promised open doors and golden opportunities. Clarissa worked in luxury marketing and knew all the codes of that world Kevin so admired. She knew exactly what to say, how to laugh at the right time, how to make networking seem casual. For weeks, she enchanted him with success stories of people who freed themselves from emotional baggage to achieve greatness. Kevin drank every word as if it were gospel. Clarissa had a peculiar way of planting ideas in his head, like seeds so small he didn't even notice they were germinating. Successful people don't take care of parents at home, she said one night while they were drinking wine at a French restaurant. They hire professionals. It's more dignified for everyone involved, you know? Kevin began to see his mother with different eyes after that. Patricia, who had always been his fortress, began to seem like an obstacle. Her simple clothes embarrassed Kevin when Clarissa was around. Her sewing stories seemed out of place in conversations about financial markets. The country accent Patricia never completely lost sounded coarse compared to Clarissa's impeccable diction. Kevin began to avoid bringing his girlfriend to visit his mother. He made up excuses, too much work, important commitments, sudden trips. Patricia felt something changing, but couldn't name what it was. It was as if her son were moving away from her, not in physical space, but in some deeper and more painful place. Clarissa was strategic, like a general planning a silent war. She knew direct confrontation wouldn't work. Kevin still had remnants of affection for his mother. So she used another tactic, forged concern. Love, your mother is getting older. What if she falls and no one is there? What if something serious happens? Kevin, who rarely visited Patricia, suddenly found himself worried about scenarios Clarissa painted with dramatic colors. There are specialized places, with nurses, activities, people her age. She deserves that professional care, doesn't she? And there it was. The seed was planted, watered with logic that seemed so reasonable, Kevin didn't even notice he was being manipulated. The marriage proposal came at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Clarissa said yes with rehearsed tears in her eyes. Kevin felt like the luckiest man in the world, not realizing he was about to lose something much more precious than any diamond ring. That night, as they celebrated the engagement with friends who barely knew Patricia, Clarissa whispered in his ear, "Now we can really start our life together, without worries." Kevin didn't understand what she meant by without worries. But Patricia, if she had been there, would have understood perfectly. She would have seen in Clarissa's eyes something her son was too blind to see. Ambition that didn't measure consequences, success that stepped on whoever was in the way. Clarissa had a plan as well crafted as a movie script. Each word that came out of her mouth was carefully chosen to lead Kevin exactly where she wanted. After the engagement, she intensified the campaign with the subtlety of someone moving pieces on a chessboard. Kevin, love, I've been thinking a lot about our life together. She began one morning while they were having coffee at a charming bistro. We want to build something grand, right? An empire, but that requires total focus. Kevin agreed, not noticing that each of Clarissa's words was a step leading him away from his mother. She touched his hand with calculated affection. Your mother deserves the best possible care. Specialized, professional care. Not that improvisation of a son trying to juggle 1,000 things. Kevin had never thought of improvisation when imagining taking care of Patricia. In fact, he rarely thought about it concretely. But Clarissa had the gift of making her ideas seem like the only sensible ones in a world of inferior options. Think about it, she continued, her green eyes fixed on his with that intensity he confused with passion. Specialized places have doctors, nurses, social activities. Your mother has worked her whole life. Now she deserves to rest, be cared for by people trained for this. Isn't it more loving to provide that for her? The twisted logic made sense in Kevin's head, who was beginning to feel even altruistic for considering the idea. After all, he would be doing the best for his mother, right? But behind the discourse packaged in concern, Clarissa had much more selfish motivations. She had seen Patricia's house, small, old, but in a neighborhood that was rapidly appreciating. That property, in the right hands, could be transformed. Clarissa already visualized the office of her dreams. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, perfect lighting for her business meeting. Patricia was just an obstacle in the way of that vision. Imagine when we have children, Clarissa planted another seed. We'll need space. And that house of your mother's, with a renovation, it would be perfect as an office, or even a second property to rent and generate passive income. Kevin listened, and slowly the idea stopped being absurd to become practical. Clarissa's real masterstroke was making Kevin believe the decision was his. She never ordered, never demanded directly. She just whispered possibilities, planted doubts, built scenarios where any other option seemed irresponsible or even cruel. People of our social position don't mix professional life with antiquated family obligations, she said one night while they were flipping through decorating magazines. We have to be practical. Your mother will be happier among people her age, doing appropriate activities, and we'll be able to focus on building the future we deserve. Kevin, who had grown up watching his mother sacrifice herself silently, hadn't developed antibodies against such sophisticated manipulation. He simply accepted that this was evolution, modernity, progress. Patricia didn't know any of this. Didn't know her house was already coveted, that her son was being molded like clay in the hands of a woman who saw people as stepping stones. When Kevin finally mentioned evaluating assisted living options, Patricia felt the floor disappear under her feet. But she didn't argue. She just looked into her son's eyes, searching for the boy she had rocked, and found a stranger wearing his face. If that's what you think is best, my son, she said quietly, her voice trembling. And in that moment of painful surrender, Patricia did something Clarissa would never expect. She prayed. She prayed that God would protect her son from paths that lead to success but destroy the soul. She prayed that one day Kevin would wake up and see what was being done. But for now, Clarissa had won the first battle. Patricia nitrogen monoxide longer recognized the number flashing on the old phone screen. She had called Kevin for the 10th time that week, and like all the others, the call went straight to voicemail. The automated voice echoed like a blow. The person you are calling is not available at the moment. Not available. The words became a sentence she heard in endless loop. Patricia left messages trying to keep her voice steady, even cheerful so as not to seem desperate. Hi son, just wanted to know how you are. Call when you can. But Kevin never called back. The silence on the other end of the line was more deafening than any scream. Patricia began counting the days between contact attempts, as if there were a magic formula that would make her son answer. What Patricia didn't know is that Clarissa had orchestrated that silence with surgical precision. In the second week after they left Patricia at the nursing home, Kevin's phone rang showing his mother's number. He reached out to answer, but Clarissa was faster. Love, don't, she said with that soft voice she used to camouflage control. You'll just feel guilty, and that doesn't help anyone. She needs to adapt to the new routine. If you keep answering all the time, you'll hinder the adaptation process. Kevin hesitated, his finger hovering over the green button. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, but Clarissa's voice was there, present, convincing. He let the call drop. And each time it became easier to do that. Clarissa went further. One night, while Kevin was showering, she grabbed his phone. She had known the password for months and blocked Patricia's number. Just like that. With a few taps on the screen, she cut the last thread connecting mother and son. When Kevin casually asked why his mother wasn't calling anymore, Clarissa had the answer ready. Maybe she's finally making friends there. That's good, love. It means you made the right decision. And she planted another poisonous seed. You know how those overprotective mothers are. They emotionally manipulate their children. It's a toxic pattern. Her silence now could be a tactic to make you feel guilty. Don't fall for it. Kevin, who barely knew his own mother after years of emotional distancing, believed. Patricia, on the other side of town, withered a little more each day. She looked at the phone as if it were an oracle that refused to speak. The other residents of the nursing home noticed. Donna Martha, who shared the room with her, touched her shoulder gently. My daughter, some children get lost along the way. We have to put them in God's hands. Patricia cried silently at night, her face buried in the thin pillow. She didn't understand what she had done so wrong to deserve that abandonment. Had she been too much of a mother? Had she loved too much? Where was the error in giving everything of herself? The questions spun in her mind without finding answers that made sense. Only the pain, constant and deep, of someone being erased from the life of someone who should love her. Patricia's phone eventually went silent too. Not because she gave up trying, she would never completely give up, but because hope began to dwindle like a candle reaching its end. She continued praying, but the prayers now came mixed with tears and a painful question directed at God. Why? Patricia didn't know her calls weren't even reaching Kevin anymore. Didn't know Clarissa had erased her existence from her son's life as easily as one deletes an unwanted contact. And maybe it was better that way, because knowing the truth, that she was being actively excluded, blocked, erased, would have hurt even more than the silence. At least the silence left room for the illusion that Kevin was just busy, not that he was consciously choosing not to answer her. In the third month of Patricia at the nursing home, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Kevin. It never was. It was from the Sunset Gardens administration, cold and bureaucratic like everything in that place. Patricia opened the envelope with trembling hands, and each word she read was like a punch in the stomach. Her private health insurance, the one she had maintained for years making extreme savings, had been canceled. Cancelled by Kevin. The letter explained in technical language that the financial guardian had opted to reduce unnecessary costs, and that she would be transferred to the wing with basic care. Patricia read it 3 times trying to understand. Kevin had cut even that? Even the little bit of medical dignity she still had? The transfer happened the following week. Patricia was taken to a completely different wing of the nursing home, where the hallways were darker, the smell of abandonment stronger, and the number of staff visibly smaller. Her new room had 4 beds squeezed into a space that barely fit 2. The walls had moisture stains, and the shared bathroom was at the end of the hallway. There were no longer the small comforts of the previous wing, the interior garden, the craft activities, the meals with some variety. Now everything was minimal, basic, survival. Patricia sat on the new bed and felt something break inside her. It wasn't just the comfort being stripped away, it was the clear message. You're not worth even this. The other residents of the minimal care wing were different. Many had serious health problems, some with advanced dementia, others completely bedridden. The nightly moans became the soundtrack of Patricia's life. She helped as she could, held Donna Irene's hand when she cried for children who never came. Read Bible verses to Senor Alberto who couldn't see anymore. Patricia transformed her pain into service because that's what she knew how to do. But at night, when the silence weighed heavy and darkness swallowed everything, she couldn't avoid the question, Lord, how much is a life of sacrifice worth? How much is a mother's love worth? The answers didn't come, only the echo of her own voice ricocheting off the damp walls. Kevin had done the math coldly. Clarissa was by his side when he called the nursing home administrator, an indifferent man named Robert, who saw elderly people only as numbers on spreadsheets. What's the minimum the law requires me to pay? Kevin asked, his voice distant, professional. Robert went over the amounts. And if I cancel her private health insurance? What's the difference in treatment? Robert explained without emotion. Fewer doctors, less medication, less everything. Kevin looked at Clarissa, who nodded with an encouraging smile. Make the change, he said. It's better to save to invest in the future. Save, invest, future. Pretty words that covered an ugly truth. He was saving money at the expense of his own mother's dignity. Patricia didn't tell anyone about the downgrade. There was a silent shame in admitting her son considered her so disposable as to cut her from health insurance. She continued praying every night, kneeling beside the uncomfortable bed, asking God to touch Kevin's heart. Lord, I know you don't abandon your children. I know there's a purpose in all this, even if I don't understand now. Her faith was being tested in ways she never imagined. But Patricia refused to let it die. She clung to God like a castaway clings to wreckage in the middle of the ocean. Because without that faith, without that hope that there was meaning in the pain, she would simply sink. And Patricia wasn't ready to sink yet. Not yet. The afternoon was gray when Patricia saw the car. A shiny black BMW, one of those that look like magazine ads, glided down the street in front of Sunset Gardens. Patricia was sitting in a cracked plastic chair near the dirty window of the community room, her new solitary habit. She looked at the street like someone searching for signs of life in a desert. When the BMW appeared, something inside her stirred before she even processed why. Then she saw. Kevin was driving, smiling, gesturing animatedly while talking. Beside him, Clarissa laughed with her head thrown back, the posture of someone who doesn't have a single worry in the world. The car passed slowly. There was a traffic light at the corner, enough time for Patricia to record every detail of that scene. They didn't even look in the direction of the nursing home. Not once. Kevin passed in front of the place where he had left his mother to rot and didn't even have the curiosity to look. Patricia felt something freeze in her chest. It wasn't anger. Anger would have been easier to process. It was something deeper, more painful. It was the visceral understanding that she had become completely irrelevant in her son's life. She wasn't even important enough to deserve a casual glance as he passed by. Patricia squeezed her hands in her lap, trying to control the trembling. Donna Martha, who was sitting beside her crocheting, noticed. "Was that your son?" she asked quietly. Patricia just nodded, unable to speak. The traffic light changed to green, and the BMW accelerated, disappearing down the street, taking with it any illusion Patricia still maintained. She had convinced herself that Kevin was too busy to visit, too overloaded to call. But seeing him there, happy and carefree just 50 meters away, destroyed that comforting narrative. Kevin wasn't suffering, wasn't torn, didn't lie awake at night thinking about her. He had simply moved on, light and free, as if Patricia were just a closed chapter of a book he didn't plan to reread. That realization cut deeper than any cruel word could have cut. Patricia returned to the room staggering as if drunk, though she hadn't touched alcohol. Donna Irene was sleeping, snoring softly. Patricia sat on the bed and grabbed the worn Bible she always kept under the pillow. She opened it randomly, looking for something, anything, that made sense of the pain crushing her. The pages fell on Psalms. "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me." She read that, and the tears finally came. They weren't tears of self-pity, but of deep surrender. Patricia realized she was clinging to Kevin as if he were her salvation, when true salvation had always been elsewhere. That night, Patricia prayed differently. She didn't ask Kevin to come back. Didn't beg God to change the circumstances. She simply surrendered. "Lord, I place my son in your hands. Take from him what needs to be taken so he can find the way back home, not to my house but to your house, and give me strength to survive while that doesn't happen." It was a prayer from someone who finally understood that some battles aren't ours to fight. Patricia slept that night with a strange peace, even amid the pain, as if God had whispered without words, "I saw, I know, and I will act." She didn't know when or how, but something in her believed. Margaret Anderson worked at the Sunset Gardens reception for 12 years. She had seen hundreds of families deposit their elderly like someone leaving luggage at a storage facility. But Patricia's story had something that bothered her, especially. Maybe it was the way the lady never complained, even after being downgraded to the most precarious wing. Or maybe it was the fact that Patricia maintained unshakable faith, despite having every reason to be bitter. Margaret decided to search through the visitation and call records, something she technically shouldn't do, but her conscience was weighing heavy. What she discovered made her furious. Kevin Anderson had called exactly once in 8 months. One single time. Margaret checked the recording of that call. The nursing home kept records of all calls for legal purposes. Kevin's voice was cold, almost clinical. How long does this type of person normally live in these conditions? This type of person, Margaret had to pause the recording. He didn't say my mother, didn't say she. He said this type of person, as if Patricia were a category, a statistic, a problem with an expiration date. The implicit question was even more shocking. Kevin was basically asking how much longer he would have to support that minimal expense. Margaret couldn't take it. She printed the complete record of calls and visits and went to Patricia's room. The lady was embroidering. She had gotten thread and needle from one of the volunteers and was making small works to occupy her hands. Donna Patricia, I need to show you something, Margaret said, closing the door. She placed the papers on the bed. I don't know if I should do this, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Patricia looked at the records and her eyes filled with tears. There it was, in black and white, proof of her abandonment. But what hurt most was reading the transcript of Kevin's only call. How long does this type of person normally live? Patricia read aloud, her voice breaking. Margaret held her hand. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have shown you this. But Patricia shook her head. No, you did right. I needed to stop creating fantasies in my head. She looked at the ceiling, tears flowing freely. My son is waiting for me to die. He's literally calculating how much longer he'll have to endure my existence. The pain of those words was physical. Patricia brought her hand to her chest as if she could hold the heart that seemed to be breaking into pieces inside her. Margaret stayed a few more minutes, but there wasn't much to say. Some pains are so deep that words just make useless noise around them. When Margaret left, Patricia was alone with those papers on the bed. She read them again, each word digging in like a thorn. Then something changed inside her. Patricia took the papers, tore them into small pieces, and threw them in the trash. Lord, I choose to forgive. Not because he deserves it, but because I need to. I won't let bitterness kill me before my time. And in that act of tearing the papers, Patricia was also tearing the chains of resentment that threatened to trap her. She didn't know yet, but that was the first step toward the miracle God was preparing. The pain in Patricia's chest began as a slight tightness. She ignored it in the first days, thinking it was just anxiety, just the physical sadness manifesting. But the tightness grew until it became a constant, heavy pain, as if someone were sitting on her heart. Patricia began having difficulty breathing, getting up, doing the simplest things. The nurse from the minimal care wing, a tired woman named Brenda, who had 30 patients to care for alone, noticed something was wrong. Patricia was paler, weaker. Her eyes had lost that spark of life they always maintained. Brenda called the nursing home doctor, Dr. Reeves, a man who had seen everything and had become almost insensitive to suffering. He examined Patricia quickly, checking pressure, heartbeats, basic reflexes. Broken heart syndrome, he murmured more to himself than to her. Patricia looked confused. It's a real condition, he explained without emotion. When extreme emotional stress causes symptoms that mimic a heart attack, technically called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Basically, your heart is literally breaking from sadness. He said that like someone saying it's raining outside, an observable fact without emotional charge. Is there treatment? Patricia asked, her voice weak. Dr. Reeves closed the clipboard. The best treatment would be eliminating the source of stress. But given that you're here... He didn't finish the sentence, but didn't need to. The message was clear. As long as she remained in that abandonment, as long as her son continued absent, her heart would continue deteriorating. I'll prescribe some medications to control the symptoms, but without the private health insurance, we have limitations. Patricia understood. She was basically receiving a slow death sentence, and no one, not Kevin, not Clarissa, not the doctors, seemed to care enough to prevent it. Brenda, unlike Dr. Reeves, had a heart that still worked. She returned to Patricia's room after the doctor left. Donna Patricia, I need to contact your son. You're really sick. He needs to know. Patricia shook her head weakly. He knows where I am. If he wanted to know about me, he would. But Brenda insisted. At least let me try. What's his number? Patricia gave the number from memory. That number she had dialed hundreds of times without answer. Brenda tried to call several times that day. All calls went straight to voicemail. She left urgent messages. Mr. Anderson, your mother is sick. Please return this call. But Kevin never returned. Patricia withered a little more each day. She barely ate, had lost pounds, her skin had a worrying pallor. The other residents began whispering she wouldn't make it through winter. But something curious was happening in parallel. The weaker her body became, the stronger her faith seemed to grow. Patricia spent hours in silent prayer, talking with God like someone talking with an intimate friend. Lord, if I'm to die here, so be it. But don't leave my son without one last miracle. Show him there's something greater than money and success. Show him true love before it's too late. And while Patricia prayed, while her physical heart slowly shattered, God was weaving an answer that no one in that nursing home could imagine. Sarah Mitchell was 32 and had a calling many found strange. While her friends spent Friday nights at bars or watching series, Sarah spent them at nursing homes. Not out of obligation or forced volunteer work, but because she genuinely loved sitting and listening to stories of long and full lives. Her church, a vibrant Christian community called Grace Fellowship, had a ministry dedicated to visiting the forgotten. Sarah was the coordinator. Every Friday she chose a different nursing home, bringing homemade cookies, cheap but beautiful flowers, and mainly presents. Real presents, not that rush disguised as charity. On the first Friday of December, Sarah arrived at Sunset Gardens. The place was more depressing than the others she visited. Peeling walls, strong smell of cheap disinfectant trying to mask other smells, flickering fluorescent lights. Sarah took a deep breath and prayed before entering. Lord, guide me to whoever needs it most today. She was taken to the minimal care wing. Nurse Brenda was happy to have someone from outside there, someone who cared. There's a lady here who's very sick. No one visits her. Maybe you could spend some time with her? Sarah agreed immediately. When Sarah entered the room and saw Patricia, something happened. She couldn't explain exactly what. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit, maybe it was intuition, maybe it was both. But Sarah felt an instant connection with that frail lady with gentle eyes. Patricia was sitting on the bed, embroidering with trembling hands a small piece of fabric. Hello, my name is Sarah. May I sit with you? Patricia looked surprised. Visitors were rare and signaled for her to sit. Sarah didn't start with invasive questions. She simply stayed there, watching Patricia embroider, making casual comments about the weather, about nothing important. Gradually, Patricia began to open up. Not because Sarah asked, but because it had been so long since anyone really listened. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam finally breaking. Patricia told about her 40 years as a seamstress, about the wedding dresses she made, about each sacrifice to raise Kevin. Sarah listened with real attention, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested, not just being polite. When Patricia got to the part about the abandonment, about the nursing home, about the recorded call asking how long she would live, her voice broke. Sarah held her hand and cried with her. Donna Patricia, may I pray with you? Sarah asked, her eyes also red. Patricia nodded. Sarah prayed with an intimacy with God Patricia hadn't seen in years. She prayed specifically, naming the pain, asking for physical and emotional healing, asking God to restore what had been stolen. When she finished, Patricia was sobbing, but they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of relief from someone who finally felt seen, heard, valued. I'll come back next week, and the next. And the next, Sarah promised. You're not alone. And for the first time in months, Patricia believed it. God had sent an angel, and her name was Sarah. Sarah's visits became the highlight of Patricia's week. Every Friday, promptly at 3 in the afternoon, Sarah appeared with her warm smile and energy that lit up that gray room. She brought small gifts, chocolate, a magazine, flowers from the church garden. But the real gift was her constant and genuine presence. Sarah didn't just visit Patricia, she saw her. She saw the woman beyond age, beyond illness, beyond abandonment. And in that seeing, Patricia slowly began to reconnect with pieces of herself she thought she had lost forever. It was during one of these visits that Sarah noticed Patricia's embroideries scattered on the bed. Small works she made to pass the time, delicate flowers, birds in full flight, complex geometric patterns. Sarah picked up one and examined it closely, impressed. Donna Patricia, this is extraordinary. You have incredible talent. Patricia shrugged, minimizing. Oh, it's just something I've done for years. It's nothing special. But Sarah vehemently disagreed. It's not nothing special. This is art. Real art. How many pieces like this have you made? Patricia thought, mentally counting decades of work. Hundreds. Maybe thousands, I lost count. Sarah had an idea that started small but quickly grew in her mind. Donna Patricia, what if we did an exhibition of your work at the church? People need to see this. You need to be seen. Patricia laughed, thinking it was exaggerated kindness. Who's going to want to see embroideries from a forgotten old woman in a nursing home? But Sarah was persistent, and there was something in her eyes, a determination mixed with inspiration that made Patricia agree timidly. Okay, if you think it's worthwhile. Sarah left that room with a mission. She didn't know yet, but God was using that simple idea to weave a much bigger miracle. During the following weeks, Sarah became a force of nature. She returned to the nursing home several times to photograph each of Patricia's pieces, the old and new embroideries. She talked with the church pastor, with the events team, with volunteers. Everyone was enchanted when they saw the images. This needs to be shared, Pastor Johnson said, his eyes shining. This is the story of a woman whose talent and faith survived abandonment. It's pure inspiration. The exhibition was scheduled for the third Sunday of January in the main hall of Grace Fellowship. Sarah took care of every detail, borrowed easels, adequate lighting, explanatory plaques beside each piece. Patricia watched all that movement with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She had never imagined her work, what she considered just a craft to survive, would be treated as art worthy of exhibition. Sarah insisted Patricia be present that day, and Brenda, the nurse, pulled some administrative strings to get authorization to take her. "You deserve to see people admiring your work, Donna Patricia," Sarah said, holding her hands. "You deserve to be celebrated." And in that moment, Patricia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not hope that Kevin would return. She had surrendered that to God. But hope that her life still had meaning, that her years of work weren't in vain. The day of the exhibition dawned sunny, as if the sky itself were conspiring for that moment. Sarah arrived early at Sunset Gardens to pick up Patricia. She had brought a simple but beautiful dress, light blue with embroidered flowers, that she had bought with her own money. "For the artist to wear on the day of her exhibition," she said, helping Patricia get dressed. Patricia cried when she saw herself in the mirror. It had been so long since she saw herself beautiful, dignified, valued. Sarah had even brought a volunteer makeup artist to do Patricia's hair and light makeup. When she was ready, she seemed to have rejuvenated 10 years. Grace Fellowship was transformed. The main hall had about 40 of Patricia's pieces carefully displayed. Each had a small plaque with information, when it was made, for what occasion, what technique was used. There were complete wedding dresses hanging like fabric sculptures, delicate handkerchiefs with embroidered initials, tablecloths that looked like impossible lace. But the centerpiece was different. It was a recent embroidery Patricia had made at the nursing home. It showed a woman kneeling in prayer, and above her, hands extended from the heavens. Patricia had embroidered that in her darkest days, as a way to remind herself she wasn't alone. Sarah had placed a special plaque, "Faith Amid Abandonment, 2024. People began arriving at 2 in the afternoon. At first they were just church members, Sarah's friends, curious community members. But then something unexpected happened. Sarah had posted photos of the exhibition on the church's social media a few days before, with the caption, "Elderly woman abandoned in nursing home creates extraordinary art. Come know Patricia Anderson's story." The post started being shared, first by church members, then by strangers, then by larger pages about art and human stories. In a few days, it had thousands of shares. Local reporters began calling, requesting interviews. What Sarah planned as a small event was going viral. Patricia was sitting in a comfortable chair beside her works when people began approaching. She told stories about each piece, for whom she had made it, at what time in her life, what challenges she had faced. People listened, fascinated. An elderly lady cried seeing a wedding dress. "It's identical to mine. You made it for me in 1982. I'm Helen Morrison, remember?" Patricia looked carefully and suddenly remembered. The shy young woman who wanted roses embroidered on the hem. They hugged, two strangers reconnected by thread and memory. Moments like this multiplied throughout the afternoon. Patricia was celebrated, embraced, admired. After months feeling invisible, she was truly being seen. But the most significant moment happened when a young journalist named Amanda Chen approached. She worked for a popular local news site with national reach. "Donna Patricia, may I ask a few questions for a story?" Patricia agreed timidly. Amanda asked about her life, her work, her sacrifices. When she got to the part about Kevin and the abandonment, Patricia hesitated. Sarah, who was beside her, held her hand encouragingly. Patricia told everything, not with bitterness, but with painful honesty. Amanda recorded every word, tears rolling down her face. "This story needs to be told," she said. That night, the story was published, "The Forgotten Seamstress: How an Abandoned Mother Still Creates Beauty." The article included photos of the works, excerpts from Patricia's interview, and a devastating question at the end. Where is Kevin Anderson while his mother withers alone? The article exploded on social media overnight. What started with a few thousand views reached 500,000 by the next morning. People shared with furious comments about Kevin, with messages of support for Patricia, with their own stories of abandoned parents. The hashtag Justice for Patricia began trending. Digital influencers picked up the story and amplified it. Radio programs discussed the case. The story had all the elements the internet loves. Clear injustice, identifiable villain, sympathetic victim, and an incendiary moral question. How can a son abandon the mother who sacrificed everything for him? Among the hundreds of thousands of people who saw the article was someone important. Victoria Ashford, now a renowned New York fashion designer, was having coffee while scrolling Instagram when she saw the photo of a specific dress. Her heart stopped. She zoomed in on the image, checked the details, and was absolutely certain. That dress, with roses delicately embroidered forming a trellis pattern on the back, was her wedding dress. The dress she had worn 30 years ago when she married in a simple ceremony, when she was just a girl with dreams and no money. A kind seamstress had made that dress for a price she could afford, and had put so much love into it that Victoria never forgot. Victoria read the entire article, her hands shaking. Patricia Anderson. The name was there, but Victoria always called her just Donna Patty back then. She remembered the kind woman who had taken measurements 3 times to ensure the dress would be perfect, who had included extra details without charging, who had hugged Victoria on the final fitting day and said, "Every bride deserves to feel like a princess on her special day." And now that same woman was abandoned in a nursing home by an ungrateful son. Victoria felt a burning anger mixed with an urgent need to do something. Victoria had 2 million followers on Instagram. Her clothing brand was in all the important magazines. When she posted, the fashion world paid attention. She chose an old photo from her wedding, her radiant in that dress with embroidered roses, and beside it, the current photo of the same dress at Patricia's exhibition. The caption was powerful. "This extraordinary woman made my wedding dress 30 years ago when I had nothing. She treated me with dignity and love. Now she's abandoned in a nursing home by her son Kevin Anderson. Where are you, Kevin? How do you sleep at night knowing your mother, this talented artist who probably sacrificed everything for you, is suffering alone? This is unacceptable. Justice for Patricia." Victoria's post was shared by other celebrities, designers, influential people. The story left the local news niche and became national. TV programs began covering it. News anchors discussed with indignation. Psychologists were interviewed about the phenomenon of children abandoning elderly parents. And at the center of everything was the question no one could answer, but everyone wanted to know. Who is Kevin Anderson, and what does he have to say about this? The pressure was mounting like a pressure cooker about to explode. And Kevin, happy in his bubble of ignorance, still had no idea of the storm that was coming his way, but was about to find out. Kevin was at his desk at Anderson and Partners Consulting when he saw the first signs that something was wrong. It was the looks first, colleagues who passed by him and quickly averted their eyes, whispers that stopped when he approached. He ignored it at first, thinking it was paranoia. But then James, the junior analyst, left his phone unlocked in the break room, and Kevin saw it unintentionally while getting coffee. It was his mother's photo, with the headline, "Son abandons elderly mother in precarious nursing home." Kevin felt the hot coffee burn his hand as the cup slipped. He grabbed James's phone with trembling hands and started reading. Each word was a punch. There was his private life, or what he thought was private, exposed for the world to see and judge. Worse still, there were details he didn't know were public. The health insurance downgrade. The call asking how long his mother would live. Patricia giving an interview talking about the sacrifices she made. Kevin felt the office spin around him. He opened his own Instagram. He had notifications reaching thousands. Messages from people he didn't know, calling him a monster, ungrateful, vile. Someone had found the company profile and was tagging on posts. "This company employs Kevin Anderson, the man who abandoned his own mother." Richard Morrison, the firm's senior partner, called Kevin to his office within an hour. Kevin entered sweating, his tie feeling like a rope around his neck. Richard had his laptop open, showing the viral article. "Kevin, I need you to explain this to me," he said, his voice dangerously calm. Kevin stuttered, trying to find words. She's in a suitable place, ... I made the best decision ... Richard interrupted him. "Do you know this woman in the wedding dress photo?" He turned the laptop, showing Victoria Ashford's post. Kevin looked confused. "No, I don't ... And then Richard dropped the bomb. "She made my wife's wedding dress too, 25 years ago. Your mother is a legend in the community. And you put her in a third-rate nursing home?" The silence in the room was deafening. Richard continued, disappointment evident in every word. "Kevin, you know our firm prides itself on family values. We have that in our mission. How can I trust you to take care of our clients' interests when you can't take care of your own mother?" Kevin felt the floor disappear. This wasn't just social embarrassment, it was his career at risk. He tried to defend himself. "Richard, it was a complex decision ... My wife and I..." Thought it was best. Richard raised his hand, cutting him off. I'll be direct. The board wants you temporarily removed until this is resolved. Our image is being tarnished by association. Fix this, Kevin, and fast. Kevin left the office in shock. His colleagues avoided looking at him. He grabbed his things mechanically and went to the parking lot. Sitting in his BMW, that same BMW that had passed in front of the nursing home without stopping to look, Kevin finally opened all the articles, all the posts, all the comments. There were thousands. People like Kevin Anderson are the shame of humanity. I hope he feels the abandonment he caused. Karma will find him. And what hurt most? Your mother sacrificed everything and you can't even visit her. You're not a man, you're a monster. Kevin read comment after comment, each one cutting deeper than the last. For the first time, he was being forced to face what he had done. He drove home on autopilot, his mind spinning in 1,000 directions. Clarissa was in the living room when he arrived, also with her phone in hand, her face pale. Kevin, we're everywhere. People are tagging me too. They're calling me ... horrible things. She was scared, not sorry, not yet. Kevin collapsed on the couch, his head in his hands. What have we done, Clarissa? What the hell have we done? And for the first time since he had signed those papers at the nursing home, Kevin allowed reality to penetrate the armor of justifications he had built. His mother was suffering. He had caused that suffering, and now the whole world knew. There was nowhere left to run, no place to hide. The truth had finally caught up with him, and it was brutal. Kevin didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's face, not as she was now, but as she was in his childhood memories. Patricia smiling while putting a bandage on his scraped knee. Patricia waking at 3 in the morning to finish a dress and still making pancakes for his breakfast. Patricia on his graduation day, crying with pride in the last row because she didn't have money for new clothes and didn't want to embarrass him sitting in front. How had he forgotten all that? How had he allowed Clarissa or anyone to convince him that abandoning that woman was acceptable? At 5 in the morning, Kevin got up and went to the home office. He opened the drawer where he kept old documents and searched until he found it. Old photos of him with his mother. There were dozens. Patricia holding him as a baby, covered in flour after they tried to make cookies together. Patricia on his 10th birthday, with a crooked but lovingly made cake. Patricia the day he received his university acceptance letter, holding the letter as if it were made of gold. Kevin hadn't looked at these photos in years. He had stored them with other things he considered overcome past. But now, looking at them with newly opened eyes, he saw a completely different story. He saw sacrifice in every image. Patricia always in simple clothes while he had the best. Patricia always smiling even when Kevin now realized she must have been exhausted, worried, overwhelmed. How had he accepted all that as if it were his right without ever questioning the price? Kevin felt something break inside him, not the anger of being publicly exposed, but something deeper, true shame, visceral remorse. That sharp pain that comes when you finally understand the magnitude of what you did wrong. He held a photo where Patricia hugged him after his first tennis competition. He had won 3rd place and she looked happier than if he had won an Olympic medal. Clarissa appeared at the office door seeing Kevin surrounded by old photos, crying silently. Kevin, she approached hesitantly. For days they had avoided real conversations, just exchanging blame and defending themselves. But now there was something different in the air. Kevin looked at her with red eyes. I was a monster, Clarissa. No matter how we try to justify it, I abandoned my mother. The woman who gave up everything for me. And I threw her in a cheap nursing home and even canceled her health insurance. His voice broke completely. I literally called asking how long she would live. As if she were an inconvenience waiting to expire. What kind of person does that? Clarissa was silent for a long moment. She looked at the scattered photos, at Kevin collapsing, and something in her also began to crack. She thought about her own grandmother, with whom she had lost contact years ago for being too busy building a career. She thought about how she had manipulated Kevin, planting ideas she knew would drive him away from his mother. She had done it consciously, strategically, without thinking about the real human consequences. Clarissa sat beside Kevin on the floor, among the scattered photos. I was too, she whispered. I convinced you. I blocked her number. God, Kevin, what have we become? And there on the floor of that home office, surrounded by evidence of a love they had ignored and devalued, 2 human beings finally began to face the truth about themselves. The decision to visit Patricia wasn't easy or quick. Kevin and Clarissa spent days in painful conversations, unearthing layers of selfishness and rationalization they had built. Clarissa confessed the complete manipulation, how she had blocked the calls, how she had planted each idea, how she had seen Patricia as an obstacle to her plans. Kevin confessed his weakness, his willingness to believe what was convenient, his conscious abandonment disguised as a practical decision. They cried together, not from self-pity, but from true repentance. The kind of repentance that cuts to the bone and demands real change. Kevin called Sunset Gardens and spoke with Brenda. "I would like to visit my mother tomorrow." There was a tense silence on the other end. Brenda had seen the viral article, as had everyone at the nursing home. "Mr. Anderson, your mother is very fragile. I don't know how she reacts to seeing you after everything." Kevin swallowed hard. "I understand. But I need to see her. Need to ask forgiveness, even if she can't give it to me." Brenda sighed. "I'll prepare her. But if she doesn't want to see you, you'll respect that." Kevin agreed, though the possibility of Patricia refusing him was like a knife in his heart. It would be deserved, he knew. It would be more than deserved. The next day, Kevin and Clarissa parked in front of Sunset Gardens. Kevin looked at the building as if seeing it for the first time. Had it always been so depressing, so inadequate? How did he leave his mother here? They entered together, hands held not from romance but from mutual need for support. The receptionist recognized them immediately. The articles had photos of Kevin, and her look was pure judgment. "You're here to see Patricia Anderson?" She said his mother's name with reverence, as if Patricia were a saint and they were sinners approaching an altar. Kevin just nodded, his voice failing. Brenda guided them to the room. "She's awake but very weak. Don't tire her." Kevin and Clarissa entered the small, cramped room of the minimal care wing. The smell of cheap disinfectant, mixed with illness, hit Kevin like a punch. And then he saw his mother. Patricia was sitting on the bed, terribly thin, her face pale, but her eyes, those eyes he remembered so full of life, still had a spark. She looked at Kevin, and for a moment that seemed like an eternity, no one spoke. Kevin felt his knees weaken. This was his mother. This was the woman who had given everything for him, and he had left her to wither here. Kevin took 2 trembling steps and collapsed on his knees beside the bed. The tears came without control, sobs that shook his whole body. "Mom, what did I do to you? For God's sake, what did I do?" He held Patricia's frail hands, kissing them repeatedly. "Forgive me. Please forgive me. I have no excuse, no justification. I abandoned you. I. The words were lost in crying. Patricia looked at her son collapsing at her feet, and something extraordinary happened. There was no anger in her eyes, no resentment. There was pain, yes, a deep pain that years of abandonment had engraved. But there was also something more, something that can only be described as grace. Patricia placed her trembling hand on Kevin's head, as she did when he was a child and had nightmares. "My son," she whispered, her voice weak but firm. "I had already forgiven you." Patricia's words fell on Kevin like rain on dry earth. "I had already forgiven you." He raised his face wet with tears, not understanding how that was possible. How does someone forgive such cruel abandonment? How do you forgive a son who calculated how long you would take to die? Patricia saw the confusion in his eyes and continued, each word costing effort but carrying deep truth. "Kevin, I spent months with anger, with hurt, wondering what I had done wrong. But God showed me that holding resentment would only kill me faster than any disease." She breathed deeply, gathering strength. "So I chose to forgive. Not because you deserved it, but because I needed to be free." Kevin cried even more, now with a different kind of tear, tears of someone receiving something they know they don't deserve. Clarissa, who was standing near the door watching everything, felt something break inside her too. She approached timidly, 4 months pregnant now with a small but visible belly. Patricia noticed, and her eyes widened slightly. "You're expecting a baby?" she asked, her voice mixing surprise with something that seemed like cautious joy. Clarissa nodded, tears finally coming. "Yes, and ... And I'm so afraid of being a mother because I don't even know how to love properly." Patricia extended her hand to Clarissa, who hesitated only a second before approaching. "My daughter," Patricia said the word with such tenderness that Clarissa almost collapsed. "You know, it was you who convinced my son to leave me here?" It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Clarissa nodded miserably, unable to speak. Patricia continued, "I was very angry with you. Very much. But then God reminded me that hurt people hurt other people, and I prayed for you. I prayed that God would heal what was broken inside you." Clarissa fell to her knees too, sobbing. "Forgive me. Please forgive me. I was horrible. I manipulated Kevin. I blocked your calls. I wanted your house. The confession came in a torrent. Clarissa told everything, the plans for the office, how she had planted each idea in Kevin's head, how she had seen Patricia as competition, how her own insecurity and ambition had transformed her into something monstrous. I was so afraid Kevin loved you more than me, so afraid of not being enough. So I tried to erase you from his life. She looked at Patricia through tears. And now I'm pregnant and realize someone could do this to my son one day. Someone could take him from me, and that terrifies me, and makes me understand what I did to you. Patricia listened to everything in silence. When Clarissa finished, she held her daughter-in-law's face in her frail hands. Clarissa, look at me. Clarissa obeyed, meeting Patricia's eyes. I forgive you too, completely. But now you need to do something for me. You need to forgive yourself. And you need to let God heal what made you feel you needed to compete. Clarissa had never had a mother who spoke to her that way. Her own mother had died when she was a child, and she grew up with an emotionally distant father. Patricia's tenderness, even after everything, broke something hardened inside her. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she whispered. Patricia smiled weakly. Grace is never about deserving, dear. It's about receiving what we don't deserve. The three stayed there, in that tiny nursing home room, crying together. They weren't just tears of sadness or shame, but of something beginning to be healed. Kevin finally found words. Mom, I'm going to take you out of here today. Now. And I'm going to hire the best caregivers. And you're going to live in our house until we find something perfect for you, or for as long as you want to stay. Patricia shook her head. Kevin, I don't want you to do this out of guilt or because of public opinion. Kevin interrupted her, holding her hands firmly. It's not out of guilt, Mom, or rather, it started out of guilt, but it's not just that. I finally woke up and saw what I had become, and I want to fix it. Please, let me fix it. The exit from Sunset Gardens was a scene Brenda would never forget. Kevin carried Patricia in his arms. She was too light, he realized with a tightening in his heart, while Clarissa carried the few things she had. Donna Martha and the other residents came to say goodbye, some crying, others applauding. You deserve this, Patty, Donna Martha said, hugging her friend. God heard your prayers. Sarah Mitchell arrived just in time to see everything happening. She had come for her weekly visit and found Kevin and Clarissa in the hallway. For a moment there was tension. Sarah had read everything, knew everything. But then she saw something in their eyes that made her pause. Real repentance. Sarah approached Patricia. Patricia, are you sure you want to go? She needed to know Patricia wasn't being coerced or manipulated again. Patricia held Sarah's hand with deep gratitude. I'm sure, my daughter, you were the angel God sent when I needed it most. You reminded me I had value. And now God is answering my prayers in a way I never imagined. Sarah hugged Patricia carefully. I'll continue visiting you, no matter where you are. Patricia nodded, crying. You'll always be welcome. Always. The two women looked at each other with mutual understanding. Both knew this was more than coincidence. It was divine providence weaving restoration. Kevin took Patricia to his house, the same house Clarissa had coveted to remodel. But now the house seemed different in both their eyes. It wasn't a trophy or project. It was the home Patricia had built with sweat and tears. Kevin and Clarissa had spent the last few days preparing the ground floor guest room, new bed, adapted bathroom, everything designed for Patricia's comfort. When she saw the room, she began crying again. You didn't need to ... Kevin interrupted her gently. We needed to. And this is just the beginning. He had hired professional nurses to come twice a day, had made appointments with the best doctors, had restored her health insurance to the best available. But the most important thing wasn't the material things. It was the moments. Kevin took leave from work. His firm agreed after he explained he needed time to repair the irreparable. He spent hours sitting with Patricia, truly talking for the first time in years. He asked about her life, about the sacrifices, about the dreams she had kept in dusty drawers of her heart. Patricia told stories he had never heard, about how she almost gave up when he was 2 and the money ran out, about the nights she cried silently so he wouldn't hear, about each difficult choice she made choosing his good over her own. Clarissa, in turn, began sitting with Patricia in the afternoons, learning to embroider. At first, it was just an attempt to apologize through actions, but it soon became something more. The two talked about motherhood, about fears, about insecurities. Patricia shared wisdom accumulated in decades of raising a son alone. True love doesn't compete. My daughter, true love multiplies. The more you give, the more you have to give. Clarissa absorbed each word like a dry sponge finally finding water. She began to see Patricia not as competition or obstacle, but as the mother she never had. And Patricia, in turn, began to see Clarissa not as the villain who stole her son, but as a wounded soul who needed healing as much as anyone. Patricia's recovery was slow but steady. With adequate medical care, nutritious food, and especially with abundant love around her, she began gaining weight again. The sickly pallor gave way to a healthy flush. Her eyes recovered that spark of life. Dr. Harrison, the cardiologist Kevin hired, was surprised. Broken heart syndrome generally has a good prognosis when the source of stress is removed. He explained to Kevin, "But I rarely see such rapid recovery. Your mother has an extraordinary will to live." Kevin knew it wasn't just will to live, it was unshakable faith and supernatural capacity to forgive. The outside world continued paying attention. The viral article had transformed into continuous follow-up. Amanda Chun, the journalist, asked permission to do a follow-up story about the reconciliation. Kevin and Clarissa hesitated, but Patricia agreed. Let people see that restoration is possible, that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. The second article was published with the title, The Forgotten Seamstress, A Miracle of Forgiveness. It showed photos of Patricia now at home, surrounded by Kevin and Clarissa, all smiling with smiles that were still fragile but genuine. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments from people saying the story inspired them to reconnect with parents they had abandoned. Victoria Ashford, the designer who had originally amplified the story, also got in touch. She wanted to do something special. "Donna Patricia, would you like to do a collaboration with me? A line of wedding dresses with your handcrafted embroideries?" Patricia was shocked. "But I'm just a simple seamstress," Victoria interrupted her smile. "You're an artist, and the world needs to see your work." Patricia accepted, not for fame or money, but because embroidering had always been her form of worship, her way of creating beauty amid chaos. The collaboration would be launched the following year, with part of the profits going to funds that helped abandoned elderly. But perhaps the greatest transformation was happening in quiet places, away from cameras and headlines. It was Clarissa kneeling beside Patricia every night, learning to pray. Clarissa had never had real faith, just superficial religiosity when convenient. But Patricia was gently guiding her to something deeper. God doesn't just want your pretty words, dear. He wants your broken and honest heart. Clarissa cried frequently during these prayers, letting years of pain and toxic ambition be washed away. It was Kevin reading the Bible with his mother in the morning, something they used to do when he was a child, but that he had abandoned in his adolescence. It was simple moments, meals together, shared laughter, comfortable silences. One afternoon, while Clarissa was embroidering, still clumsily beside Patricia, she placed her hand on her growing belly. "Donna, Patricia, do you want to be an active grandmother in this baby's life?" The question came out hesitant, vulnerable. Patricia placed her hand over Clarissa's. "My daughter, I don't just want to be grandmother. I want to be part of the family for real. If you'll accept me." Clarissa broke down in tears. "We accept you, and ... And I want you to teach me to be a mother, because I have no idea what I'm doing." Patricia laughed softly, that laugh Kevin remembered from his childhood. "No one knows, dear. We learn and make mistakes together. But with love and with God, we always find the way." And in that moment, Clarissa realized she had gained more than forgiveness. She had gained a mother. A real family. 6 months later, on a sunny July morning, Sarah Mitchell arrived for her weekly visit to Kevin and Clarissa's house. She had never stopped coming, even after Patricia left the nursing home. The two had developed a deep friendship that transcended the circumstances that united them. Today Sarah brought a special guest, Pastor Johnson from her church. Patricia was in the backyard, that same yard Clarissa had planned to destroy to make a minimalist office. But now the yard was blooming, with Patricia planting roses she cared for herself. She had found joy in making things grow again. Pastor Johnson had asked to meet Patricia personally. He wanted to invite her to give a testimony at church. "Donna Patricia, your story has touched so many people. Not just about abandonment and reconciliation, but about radical forgiveness that only comes from God." Patricia hesitated. She had never been one to speak in public, always preferring to express her faith through quiet actions. But Sarah touched her shoulder encouragingly. "Donna Patricia, how many mothers are suffering right now? What you suffered. How many need to hear it's possible to forgive the unforgivable?" Patricia thought and finally agreed. "I'll do it. Not for me, but so God may be glorified." The testimony happened on an August Sunday. The church was packed, not just regular members, but people who had followed the story online and wanted to be present. Patricia went up to the stage helped by Kevin, who was sitting in the first row with Clarissa, now 7 months pregnant. Patricia looked at the sea of faces and took a deep breath. She began telling her story, not sparing painful details, but also not demonizing Kevin. She spoke about the abandonment, about the pain that almost killed her, about the nights praying in desperation. There were moments I begged God to take me, she confessed, her voice echoing through the sanctuary. The pain was so much that dying seemed better than continuing to live. But then her voice changed, gaining strength. But God taught me something powerful in that nursing. He taught me that holding resentment is like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. He showed me that forgiveness isn't about letting the person get away with it. It's about freeing ourselves from the prison of bitterness. Patricia spoke about the daily choice to forgive, about how she prayed for Kevin and Clarissa, even when it seemed to make no difference. I didn't forgive because they deserved it. I forgave because God forgave me first of so many things. And because I knew the only way out of that place, not physically but emotionally, was through forgiveness. Patricia pointed to Kevin and Clarissa. My son and daughter-in-law are here today, not because I forced them. They're here because God honored my obedience. When I chose to forgive even without seeing change in them, God began working in their hearts in ways I never could. Kevin was crying openly now, without shame. Clarissa held his hand, also with tears streaming. Patricia concluded, the message I want to leave is this: God doesn't waste anything. Not our pain, not our mistakes, not our sins. He transforms everything when we surrender to Him. The miracle wasn't just me leaving the nursing home. The miracle was my heart being healed of hatred. The miracle was gaining a daughter in Clarissa, a friend in Sarah, and getting my son back. But above all, the miracle was discovering that God's love is big enough to restore what seemed completely destroyed. 2 weeks after the testimony, Clarissa went into labor. It was too early, she was only 36 weeks. Kevin rushed her to the hospital, while Patricia followed in another car driven by Sarah. The hospital waiting room was tense. Labor was complicated, the baby was in a difficult position. Doctors talked about emergency cesarean. Kevin was pale, pacing back and forth. Patricia held his arm. Let's pray, my son. Right there, in the waiting room with dozens of strangers around, Patricia prayed out loud. She asked for protection for Clarissa, safety for the baby, wisdom for the doctors. Her faith was so palpable that other people in the room bowed their heads too. After 5 hours of intense labor, the baby was born. A girl. Tiny but healthy, with lungs that worked perfectly, proven by vigorous cries. Kevin entered first to see Clarissa, who was exhausted but radiant. Is she okay? Were her first words, worried about her daughter before herself. Kevin nodded, crying with relief. She's perfect. Small, but perfect. Then Clarissa said something that made Kevin cry even more. I want to name her Patricia Grace. Patricia for your mother, Grace for the grace given to us when we didn't deserve it. When Patricia was finally allowed to enter and saw her granddaughter, Patricia Grace Anderson, she held that little miracle in her arms and cried tears of pure joy. They weren't tears of sadness or pain, but of completeness. She looked at that perfect little face and saw purpose. Saw redemption. Saw God's faithfulness fulfilling promises she didn't even know had been made. Hello, little Grace, she whispered. Your grandma has so much to teach you. I'll teach you about the God who restores what was broken. I'll teach you about forgiveness that liberates. I'll teach you that no situation is too impossible for God to change. Kevin watched his mother holding his daughter and felt deep gratitude mixed with remorse that would never completely disappear. He thought about how dangerously close he came to losing this. Not just his mother, but the chance for his daughter to know an extraordinary grandmother. He thought about how much Patricia Grace would have lost if he had maintained the course of selfishness. Mom, he said quietly, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for continuing to pray even when I didn't deserve your prayers. Patricia looked at him with eyes full of love. My son, mothers never give up. Never. And God also never gives up on his children. Clarissa, from the bed, watched the scene and felt deep peace. She had spent the entire pregnancy afraid of not knowing how to be a mother, afraid of repeating patterns of emotional abandonment she had experienced. But now, seeing Patricia with the baby, seeing the unconditional love that flowed naturally, she knew she wasn't alone. She would have Patricia to guide her, to show her how to love sacrificially, how to forgive generously, how to raise with grace. Donna Patricia, Clarissa called, her voice still weak from childbirth. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for teaching me what it really means to be a mother. Patricia smiled, gently rocking Grace. My daughter, we all learn together. And with guiding, this little one will grow surrounded by love she never doubt. The months that followed were of adjustment and learning. Patricia moved permanently to a comfortable suite on the second floor. Kevin had completely remodeled it, with adapted bathroom, balcony overlooking the garden, space for her sewing machine and all her materials. She insisted on helping with Grace whenever her health allowed. Clarissa was initially worried, afraid of overloading Patricia, but her mother-in-law was insistent. Taking care of my granddaughter is an obligation, it's privilege, she said smiling. And it was true, nothing revived Patricia more than holding that baby and singing the same lullabies she sang to Kevin decades ago. The collaboration with Victoria Ashford materialized. The Legacy Lace line was launched with luxury wedding dresses featuring Patricia's handcrafted embroideries. Each dress took weeks to complete and cost tens of thousands of dollars. But it wasn't about the money for Patricia. It was about creating beauty again, about feeling her gift had purpose. The income she received was deposited in a fund she created called Grace Restoration Fund, dedicated to helping families in crisis and abandoned elderly. God restored me, she explained to Kevin when he questioned why she gave away so much money. Now it's my turn to help restore others. Kevin had returned to work but was a different version of himself. He had learned to set boundaries, to prioritize family over promotions, to measure success not in bank numbers but in moments that matter. Richard Morrison, his boss, noticed the change. Kevin, you're different, more centered, more human. Kevin smiled. I learned the hard way what really matters. I won't make the same mistake twice. His story had become legend at the office, not as scandal, but as example of redemption. He was frequently approached by colleagues wanting advice on how to balance career and family. Clarissa had found her vocation. She started a blog and then a podcast called Redeemed Hearts, where she interviewed people about family reconciliation stories. Her first episode was with Patricia, telling the whole story. The podcast went viral, touching millions who struggled with broken family relationships. Clarissa spoke openly about her manipulation, her selfishness, her repentance. I was the villain of my own story, she said frequently, but Grace transformed me. Patricia frequently appeared as co-host, bringing perspective on forgiveness and faith that perfectly complemented Clarissa's brutal honesty. Sarah Mitchell continued being an essential part of the family. She was Grace's godmother and visited weekly. She and Patricia had started a ministry together. They visited nursing homes together now, bringing hope to other forgotten ones. They told Patricia's story not to glorify suffering, but to show God can write beautiful endings to stories that seem to end in tragedy. Dozens of families were reconciled through this ministry. Children who hadn't visited parents in years were convinced to try again. Parents who had given up on rebellious children learned to pray with renewed hope. What began as one woman abandoned a nursing home had become a family restoration movement. On Grace's first birthday, the family organized a party in the house's garden. It wasn't an extravagant event, but it was full of love. Sarah was there with her family. Victoria Ashford had come from New York. Amanda Chun, the journalist, was there with her husband. Brenda, the Sunset Gardens nurse, had been invited and came emotional. Even Dawn and Martha and some other residents from the nursing home Patricia had befriended were brought to participate. It was a celebration not just of Grace's birthday, but of a year of complete restoration. Patricia was sitting in a comfortable chair, Grace in her lap, watching everyone. Kevin approached and sat beside her. "Mom, are you happy?" he asked, needing to hear the answer. Patricia looked around, the blooming garden, the people she loved, her smiling granddaughter in her arms, Clarissa laughing with Sarah near the dessert table. "My son, I'm more than happy. I'm grateful. A year ago, I was in a nursing home thinking my life was over. Today, I have a family bigger than I could have dreamed." She looked into his eyes. "And most important, I have you back. The real you, not that empty man who was losing himself in ambition and..." Kevin held his mother's hand. "I'm sorry for every day you spent in that place. Sorry for every call I didn't answer, for every selfish decision, for forgetting who you really were to me." Patricia squeezed his hand. "Kevin, I've already forgiven you. You need to stop punishing yourself and start living in grace. God didn't bring you here for you to be stuck in the past. He brought you here to live a different future." Her words were the liberation Kevin needed to hear repeatedly. He was slowly learning to receive the forgiveness he didn't deserve, but that was given generously. Clarissa joined them, bringing a piece of cake. "Donna, Patricia, Grace is getting heavy. Let me take her." But Patricia shook her head, smiling. "Not yet, dear. Let me enjoy a little more." Clarissa sat on the grass at Patricia's feet, resting her head on her mother-in-law's knee as a daughter does with mother. Donna Patricia, I never thanked you adequately. You didn't just forgive, you adopted me as a daughter. You gave me the mother I never had. Patricia ran her hand through Clarissa's hair affectionately. My daughter, God has a funny way of building families. It's not always blood. Sometimes it's choice. I choose you every day. The party continued until sunset. When the guests left and Grace was sleeping, Kevin, Clarissa, and Patricia sat in the garden under the stars. It was comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have gone through fire together and came out the other side. Patricia broke the silence. Do you know what I learned from all this? Kevin and Clarissa looked at her. I learned that miracles are rarely instantaneous. They're process. God was working even when I couldn't see. Each prayer I thought wasn't being heard was being answered, just not the way I expected. She smiled, looking at the stars. I asked to leave the nursing home. God gave me a restored family. I asked not to die alone. God gave me a granddaughter to love. I asked for Kevin to change. God changed all of us. 2 years after the reconciliation, the Anderson family had completely transformed. Kevin had written a book called From Abandonment to Redemption, the story that changed my life, which became a bestseller. All book income went to the Grace Restoration Fund. Clarissa had expanded her podcast to a complete nonprofit organization called Redeemed Hearts Ministries, offering subsidized therapy for families in crisis. Patricia, now 75, continued embroidering, slower but with the same mastery. Her pieces were sold at charity auctions for surprising amounts, every cent going to help other elderly. Grace was now 7, a brilliant child full of compassion. She accompanied Patricia on visits to nursing homes, bringing drawings she made for residents. She would never know a version of her father who abandoned his grandmother. She only knew the father who sat every night to read Bible stories with her, the father who prioritized family above everything, the father who spoke openly about his past mistakes as lessons. And she had a grandmother who adored her, who taught her to embroider, who told stories of how God transforms ashes into beauty. Grace's life was being built on a completely different foundation from what Kevin had. But perhaps the most significant transformation was happening on a larger scale. Patricia's story had inspired a national movement against elderly neglect. Laws were proposed requiring nursing homes to keep visitation records accessible to the public. Grandparent adoption programs emerged in churches across the country, connecting elderly without family with young volunteers. Victoria Ashford had used her influence to create an awareness campaign about elderly abandonment. Academic articles were written studying the Patricia Anderson phenomenon, how one individual story can catalyze social change. All because one woman chose to forgive instead of letting bitterness win. Sarah Mitchell continued being an essential part of the family. She and Patricia still visited nursing homes together weekly, now accompanied by a team of trained volunteers. They identified the most forgotten, the most desperate, and poured practical love over them. Some stories ended in family reconciliation. Others didn't. Some families were too destroyed. But even in these cases, Patricia ensured no one died alone. She held hands of strangers on deathbeds, prayed with them, assured them they were seen and valued. Everyone deserves to die knowing they mattered, she said. Everyone deserves to hear they're loved. Kevin watched his mother from afar sometimes and marveled. That woman he had left to die in a precarious nursing home had become a spiritual giant, touching thousands of lives, and he had almost wasted it, almost lost forever the chance to learn from her, to be transformed by her, to see God work through her. The thought still haunted him occasionally, not with paralyzing guilt, but with overwhelming gratitude for a second chance he didn't deserve. He had learned that grace isn't just about forgiveness, it's about undeserved opportunities to write different endings. On the 10th anniversary of the reconciliation, the family organized a special celebration. Not an extravagant party, but an intimate gathering with everyone who was part of the journey. Sarah and her family, Victoria Ashford, Amanda Chun, who continued following the story through the years, Brenda, the nurse, Donna Martha, who was still alive at 93, Pastor Johnson and key members of Grace Fellowship, Margaret, Patricia's sister, with whom the reconciliation had flourished beautifully. Grace, now 12, had asked to organize something special for her grandmother. Grace had worked in secret for months on a project. She had collected stories, video interviews with dozens of people whose lives were touched by Patricia. Not just Kevin and Clarissa, but people from across the country. A lady in Oregon whose daughter had sought her out after 15 years of silence because of Patricia's story. A man in Florida who had taken his father out of a nursing home after seeing the viral article. A young woman in Texas who had started a similar ministry in her local church. Grace had edited everything into a 30-minute documentary titled, The Domino Effect of Forgiveness: How One Grandmother Changed the World. When the lights went out and the documentary started, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Story after story of restoration, all connected somehow to Patricia's choice to forgive. Grace's narration, her voice young but mature beyond her years, weaving everything together. My grandma didn't know that when she chose to forgive my dad, she was starting a wave that would spread to thousands of people. She wasn't trying to change the world. She was just trying to obey God amid her pain. But God took that obedience and multiplied it in ways no one could imagine. The documentary ended with Patricia being interviewed by Grace. Grandma, if you could go back in time and skip all the suffering part, would you skip it? Grace had asked. Patricia had thought carefully before answering. My dear, I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone. It was horrible. It was almost deadly. But she paused, tears in her eyes. But I wouldn't be who I am today without that valley. I wouldn't have this depth of faith, wouldn't have this understanding of forgiveness, wouldn't have this ministry, wouldn't have impacted the lives I impact. So no, I wouldn't skip it. I would trust God through it again, knowing He was weaving something beautiful from my brokenness. The room exploded in applause when the lights came back on. Patricia was crying, holding Grace in a tight embrace. My granddaughter, my little Grace, you have an extraordinary gift, she whispered. Kevin and Clarissa were embracing, also crying. They looked at their daughter, this child who existed only because a miracle had happened, because forgiveness had triumphed, and saw the future, saw generations being impacted, saw a legacy of grace continuing far beyond them. This was Patricia's reward. Not just restored family, but family that was now restoring others. Her forgiveness had created a ripple that would continue spreading long after she left this world. Patricia was now 80. Her health had remained surprisingly good considering everything her body had gone through. But she could feel time advancing, not with fear, but with peaceful acceptance. She had lived completely, loved deeply, forgiven radically. She had no pending matters, no unspoken words. On a quiet spring afternoon, she called Kevin, Clarissa, and Grace for a conversation in the garden, that garden that had become a sacred place for the family. I want to talk about when I depart, Patricia began, straight to the point. Kevin immediately protested. Mom, you'll live to 100. But Patricia smiled and shook her head. My son, I've already lived longer than I imagined. Every day since that nursing home has been an undeserved gift. But we need to have this conversation. She looked at each of them. When my time comes, and it will come eventually for all of us, I want you to celebrate. Not mourn excessively. I want you to remember I departed knowing I was loved, that I saw my son restored, that I gained a daughter and granddaughter, that I saw purpose born from my pain. Clarissa was crying openly. Donna Patricia, you're the mother I never had. I can't imagine this world without you. Patricia held her hand. My daughter, I'll always be with you. In the values I taught you, in the prayers I prayed, in the way you raised Grace. Death can't erase the impact of a well-lived life. She looked at Grace. And you, my little Grace, you'll continue the legacy. You'll teach your children about forgiveness. You'll tell the stories. You'll carry forward what you learned. Grace, now a mature teenager, struggled to find words. Grandma, you taught me that people aren't their mistakes. That everyone deserves a second chance. That love is choice, not just feeling. She took a deep breath. And I promise I'll live in a way that honors everything you taught me. I'll forgive when it's difficult. I'll love when it doesn't make sense. I'll trust God when I can't see the way. Patricia smiled with deep pride. My girl, you're already doing that. You're evidence that grace transforms generations. Kevin had been quiet, processing. Finally he spoke. Mom, I wasted so many years. Years I could have spent with you. And now ... His voice broke. Patricia interrupted him firmly. Kevin Anderson, you stop that now. We're not going to spend our time together lamenting the time we lost. We're going to celebrate the time we have. We're going to be grateful for every moment since that day you came to the nursing home. We're going to thank God for writing an ending better than any of us deserved. She held his face. You're no longer that man who abandoned me. You're the son who returned. You're the father Grace knows. You're the man God redeemed. And I'm proud of you beyond words. 3 years after that conversation in the garden, Patricia passed away peacefully during sleep. She was 83. Kevin found her in the morning, looking peaceful, almost smiling. Beside the bed was her Bible open to Romans 8, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him. Her last hours had been spent reading promises she had lived. The funeral was an extraordinary celebration of a well-lived life. The church was packed beyond capacity, hundreds of people whose lives she had touched. Pastor Johnson officiated, but it was the shared stories that made the service unforgettable. Sarah Mitchell was the first to speak. Patricia taught me never to underestimate the power of simply showing up. I showed up at a nursing home once, not knowing I was being the answer to desperate prayers. Patricia taught me that God uses ordinary people willing to be obedient. Victoria Ashford spoke about how a humble seamstress had impacted the fashion industry and started conversations about the value of often invisible artisans. Amanda Chan shared about how Patricia's story had changed her journalistic career, making her focus on redemption stories instead of just scandals. Donna Martha, now 100 and still lucid, was brought in a wheelchair to speak. Patricia was my roommate in that horrible nursing home. We had both been forgotten by our children, but I became bitter and Patricia chose to forgive. And I saw what happened. God honored her faith. Years later, my own daughter returned, inspired by Patricia's story. So Patricia didn't just save her own family. She helped save mine too. There wasn't a dry eye when Donna Martha finished. But it was Grace, now 15, who gave the most powerful eulogy. She went up to the pulpit with confidence beyond her years, a confidence rooted in secure love she had received. My grandmother told me once she wanted me to tell the stories, so that's what I'm going to do. Grace told the whole story, not sparing ugly details about abandonment, manipulation, suffering. She spoke about a grandmother she should never have known if not for a miracle. My grandma could have chosen hurt, could have died bitter in that nursing home, but she chose forgiveness. And because of that choice, I exist. My parents have a real marriage. Thousands of families were restored. Grace concluded with tears streaming but firm voice. Grandma, you taught me that no matter how broken the story is, God can write a beautiful ending if we trust Him. You taught me that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's superpower. You taught me that love always wins, but sometimes takes time. And I promise, Grandma, I promise I'll carry this legacy forward. I'll tell your story until my last breath. Because the world needs to know that restoration is possible, that families can be healed, that God doesn't waste anything, not even our deepest suffering. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. It wasn't just for Patricia, it was recognition of something sacred, something eternal that had been witnessed. 6 months after the funeral, Kevin was in his mother's old room. Clarissa kept everything exactly as Patricia left it, not as a museum, but as a living reminder. The sewing machine was still there, the unfinished embroideries, the worn Bible on the bedside table. Kevin picked up the Bible and noticed annotations he had never seen before. In the margins, Patricia had written dated prayers. He flipped until he found the Psalms section and saw, with trembling handwriting, March 5th, 10th, Lord, my son forgot me, but I know you haven't forgotten me. Protect him. Open his eyes. Don't let him continue on this path of destruction. Kevin flipped more. There were dozens of similar prayers, scattered throughout the Bible. Each one dated, each one specific. Some were from days he knew she was suffering more, days he had chosen to ignore her calls, days he had been especially cruel in thought. And on each of these days, she was praying for him. Not cursing, not asking for revenge, asking for restoration, asking God to save him from himself. Kevin collapsed on the floor, holding the Bible against his chest, sobbing. Mom, you never stopped. Not one day did you stop fighting for me. And he found a letter tucked between the pages. It was addressed to him, written in Patricia's increasingly trembling handwriting in her last months. Kevin opened it with trembling hands. My dear Kevin, if you're reading this, it means I've already departed to the Father's house. Don't cry too much for me, my son. I lived beyond my wildest hopes. I saw you come back home. I saw you become the man I always knew you could be. I gained a daughter in Clarissa and a granddaughter in Grace. I saw extraordinary purpose born from pain. I want you to know something important. I never, not for a second, regretted forgiving you. Some people told me I was weak, that I should have made you pay for what you did. But these people don't understand grace. Forgiving you was the most powerful thing I ever did. It freed me from the prison of bitterness. It allowed me to see God work miracles. Continue telling our story, Kevin, not to glorify me, but to glorify God. Let people know that no situation is too impossible for Him to transform. No family is too broken to be restored. No heart is too hardened to be softened by His grace. Take care of Clarissa. She's more fragile than she seems. She needs constant reminders she's loved unconditionally. And Grace, oh my precious Grace, teach her to be a prayer warrior. Teach her that the greatest legacy she can leave is a life lived in forgiveness and grace. I love you, my son. I always loved you. Even when you didn't deserve it, even when you hurt me, even when you abandoned me, I never stopped loving you, because that's what mothers do. That's what God does. And now you understand, because you're a father too. We'll see each other again one day, where there are no more tears, no pain, no regrets, only eternal joy. With all my love, your mother. P.S. The roses in the garden need special watering on summer mornings. Don't let them die. They were planted with prayers over our family. 10 years after Patricia's death, the impact of her life continued spreading. Grace was now 25 and pursuing a master's in family psychology, specialized in family conflict mediation. She had written her dissertation on the role of forgiveness in restoring broken relationships. Using her grandmother's story as the primary case study, the thesis was published and became an academic reference, cited in dozens of other works. Grace had Patricia's gift for transforming personal pain into purpose that served others. Kevin had become a sought-after speaker, traveling the country sharing his journey from abandonment to reconciliation. He never softened his part in the story, never minimized the horror of what he had done. That brutal honesty resonated with audiences. After each talk, lines of people waited to speak. Children who needed to hear, it wasn't too late to return. Parents who needed to hear forgiveness was possible. Kevin had become for others what Patricia was for him. Living witness that people can change if they give themselves a chance and allow God to work. Clarissa had expanded Redeemed Hearts Ministries to a national organization with chapters in 40 states. They offered not just therapy and mediation, but also preventive education, teaching young families about healthy communication, about dangers of emotional neglect, about importance of honoring elders. The ministry had become a model studied by other similar organizations globally. And in every event, in every workshop, in every therapy session, Patricia's story was told. She had become legend, not because she sought fame, but because she lived principles the world desperately needed to see in action. The Grace Restoration Fund had grown exponentially. With ongoing donations and media attention, they now had resources to make significant difference. Nursing homes received complete renovations. Visitation programs were established in 100 cities. Scholarships were created for family therapy. A complete documentary about Patricia's life was produced and released on a streaming platform, reaching millions. Awards were won. Recognition came from national organizations. But the real prize were the thousands of letters that arrived annually, stories of reconciliation. Each one a distant echo of the choice Patricia made to forgive when it didn't make sense. And the roses in the garden? Kevin watered them religiously every summer morning, exactly as Patricia asked. He kept the garden as a living sanctuary, a place where the family gathered for important moments. It was there that Grace announced her engagement. It was there that Kevin and Clarissa renewed vows on their 20th anniversary, with a ceremony focused not on Hollywood romance but on commitment tested in fire and proven genuine. It was there they cried when they missed Patricia. And it was there they prayed, continuing her legacy of taking everything to God, knowing He transforms everything. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more faith stories that transform lives. And share in the comments. Have you lived a miracle of family restoration? Let's inspire each other.